All right. Hello, everyone. We are live with our final session of the Mission Viejo Library Virtual Comic Fest. Thank you to everyone who's joining us this evening. We have a wonderful presentation about women writing genre fiction, and I am so excited. So while everyone is kind of trickling in, I'm just going to say welcome. I should introduce myself, and then I'm going to introduce our wonderful panelists. So good evening, everyone. My name is Alison Tran, and I am a librarian with the Mission Viejo Library. And we do a comic fest every year, but of course the pandemic changed a few things. So last year we had to cancel our comic fest at the last minute because it was supposed to be in March of 2020. So we all know how that went. But this year we were so excited to bring it back in a virtual format. So we've been having sessions all week, and this is the grand finale. We're so excited. We have two wonderful authors here, and we have our attendees coming in. We've got some prizes to give away, which I will be awarding at random around the end of the session. So we're going to have our talk, and then we have Q&A. So audience members, if you have questions for our authors, please put them in the Q&A. We don't have a chat for this webinar, but we do have the Q&A. So go ahead and ask your questions, and we'll get those answered for you towards the end of the session. All right. So I am so excited to tell you all we have Gretchen McNeil and Zoraida Cordova joining us tonight. So let me just introduce them briefly before we really kick off the whole thing. Gretchen McNeil is the author of several young adult novels, including Possess, 359, Relic, I'm Not Your Manic Pixie Dream Girl, Get Even, Get Dirty, and 10, as well as the horror comedy novels, Murder Trending and Murder Funding. Actually, those have hashtags in front. I should say hashtag Murder Trending and hashtag Murder Funding. And she had one of those novels, 10, was turned into a Lifetime movie starring China Anne McClain, who you might remember from Descendants 2. So fun. And then Get Even and Get Dirty have been adapted as the series Get Even for the BBC, and you can catch it on Netflix. So that's super exciting. And then let me introduce Zarita Cordova. She is the author of more than a dozen novels and short stories, including the Brooklyn Brujas series and Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, A Crash of Fate. In addition to writing novels, she serves on the board of We Need Diverse Books, which we sure do. And she's the co-editor of the best-selling anthology, Vampires Never Get Old, as well as the co-host of the writing podcast, Deadline City. She writes romance novels as Zoe Castile, and Zoraida joins us from New York. She's over on the East Coast, so thanks for staying up late. So, ladies, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for having us. I'm excited.
I know. As soon as I read that it was like you're going to be on a panel with Gretchen McNeil, I was like, yeah, of course.
Love Gretchen too.
Zarida and I met back in the day of writing, like 2011
for sure. 2011.
10 years.
I know. Wow.
Was that when you both had your first books coming out, or?
Yeah. It was. Gretchen was sort of our still sort of is like our fearless leader for this group. Like a lot of authors have debut groups. And so our group was called the Apocalypses because we were coming out in 2012. And Gretchen organized a lot of our like social interactions. And I was like annoying and 24 and was like, Gretchen, be my friend. So
you were not annoying. You have always been an old soul, see, and we got along well from the beginning. So
yeah,
10 years. Look at us, still here.
Well, we hosted Gretchen at our Mission Viejo Library Readers Festival, which was a big in-person event that we used to do. And so Gretchen was on like a YA panel with us, and I guess that was 2011 as well. So it was
20. My debut came out in August of 2011, so it was like that, like late summer, early fall, whatever it was. Yes, it was like my first official event.
I love that. So special. So we're so excited to have you back. And Zoraida, you being on the East Coast, we would probably never get to host you in person, which is like sad to me, but so exciting that you're here virtually with us. So thank you again for taking the time. Well,
Absolutely.
would you ladies mind just kind of tell our viewers what your latest books are about? Because I'm sure they're familiar. If they're attending this panel, they probably have read a few of your books, but just in case we have any newbies here.
Gretch?
Oh, sure. My newest book is called #No Escape, and it's actually the third book in the Murder Trending series. The series itself is the first book I pitch as imagine a world where a reality TV host gets elected president of the United States. And he sells the criminal justice system to his producer, and together they create Alcatraz 2.0 in San Francisco, which is a prison island where people convicted of capital crimes are sent to live in little duplex apartments and work jobs on like a fake main street. And then eventually they are hunted down and killed by thematic serial killers, and their deaths are streamed live on an app for your phone or tablet. So the first book takes place on the island. It's about a girl named Dee who gets sent there, falsely convicted of killing her stepsister, and is sent there and has to figure out, why she was framed as things start to go even more awry on the island. And then the second book, Murder Funding, takes place 3 weeks after the end of the events of the first book, which is, and it's a different main character. It's someone whose mother just died. Becca's mother just died. And someone tells her that her mother might have been one of the famous Paniacs, the serial killers on Alcatraz 2.0. And so she heads to Los Angeles to find out if that's true or not by auditioning for a reality TV show that's being produced by people who might have been involved with the original Alcatraz. So that's book 2. And then No Escape is a prequel novel. It takes place 20 years before, and it's an escape room murder fest. So it's a girl named Percy who's invited to participate in this all-star escape room competition with a monetary prize that is so high she cannot possibly turn down the invitation despite desperately wanting to. And when they get to the headquarters of this escape room company in the Las Vegas desert, and the 8 of them start the competition, they start dying in sort of increasingly horrific ways. And Percy has to figure out who's killing them and why, because no one's coming to save them. So it's just like a string of escape rooms. It was insane to put together. But you don't have to have read the first 2 books in the series to have a wonderful experience with No Escape. They don't connect a whole lot until the very last chapter.
I love it.
So I love it.
Like, the horror is so scary, but like also it has this element of comedy for sure.
There's a lot of comedy. I think horror and comedy go together, the salty and the sweet. You think of something like Scream.
Yes. I Know What You Did Last Summer. A little bit.
Classics.
Such a runaway success. Yeah, I Know What You Did Last Summer. Like there's just something.
Absolutely. My latest book is called Incendiary. It is, I have it conveniently right here. Beautiful. It is a duology, 2 books. It's a high fantasy inspired by the Spanish Inquisition. It's about a group of people with magical abilities, all sensory magic, and a young girl who has the ability to steal people's memories. And she was used as a child soldier when she was a kid by the king. And now she has joined the resistance, if you will. It's literally like high fantasy Star Wars. She's joined the resistance and a rebel group. And when the love of her life and best friend and commander gets taken by the king and the prince, the dubious prince, she returns to the palace to literally murder everybody and get revenge for the crimes of the crown. And so it's 2 books. It's a very, very slow burn romance. So book 2 is a romance adventure, and the first book already came out in paperback like a week ago, and book 2 is coming out in May 11th. So it's going to be all over on May 11th. So I'm very excited.
That is really exciting. Oh my goodness. Well, you ladies touched a little bit about that you got published, like your books came out in 2011, 2012. So tell us now, I mean, that was a while ago. So you've got a few books under your belts now, but like what was it like, your publishing journeys when you know, were submitting to agents? How did it go?
I had a
Yeah, yours
non-traditional,
is non-traditional. I was just gonna say.
yeah, I had a non-traditional route into publishing. When I was 18, I interned at a literary agency. This very kooky man who had been in the publishing industry for like 30 years, and his assistant, who had just left like pharmaceutical billing to go into publishing. Um, and she knew that I loved books and that I wanted to be a writer. And so she encouraged me to finish my first novel. That book we did not sell, but she signed me anyway because she had read, you know, obviously she loved the first book. That book we didn't sell it, but, and then I didn't write for a whole year because I was like so dramatic. And I was like, I'm never going to get published. I'm 19 years old. And my favorite author at the time was like a girl who had been published at 14. So by then I was already like, oh my God, like she at 14 with Random House. And so I wrote another book, and that was the key. And that book we did sell to a publisher. And now they can't get rid of me. I'm just gonna like keep putting out books until they just tell me no. So that's you know, I didn't query. I queried later. I've been through 3 agents now. So I've queried after. I queried for my second agent, and then I queried for my third agent. But every time that I queried, I sent it to less and less people because I had very specific parameters of what I was looking for.
Because
Yeah,
you know more about the business.
yeah. Because now I know too many people's secrets, and I'm just like, well, there's like 2 people I can work with.
Oh, that's funny. That's a great story. I love that. So what about you, Gretchen?
Yeah, mine was more traditional, except for the fact that I didn't start writing till I was in my 30s. I was actually, I'm a trained opera singer, though not a very good one, or I wouldn't be here talking to you about how I write books. But I sort of banged on that door for many years. And then I worked in television production for a while with my first husband, who was a show creator, and we did some cartoons together and some stuff on Adult Swim and Comedy Central. And then we divorced, and it was when we split that I started writing. And it was just this moment of, I'm not singing anymore. I'm not doing TV anymore. It's not really my thing. Like, what is my thing? And I was like, I'm going to write a novel, as you do. And I wrote a horrible novel.
You're so LA.
Horrible. So LA, right? Like, it wasn't a screen. No, LA would be, I wrote my screenplay. That would have been the LA version. But I knew even less about that than books. And I wrote an adult rom-com that I like to joke was neither romantic nor funny, and tried to get an agent, and nobody wanted it, shockingly. But I had a couple of agents who suggested that maybe the book felt more YA. And I said, what's YA? Because I'm so old that there was no YA when I was a teen. We had Babysitter's Club, Sweet Valley High, Christopher Pike, Lois Duncan, The Outsiders, which was written in the 70s, which was 20 years before I was a teen. You know, like, there just wasn't that that sense that teenagers wanted to read books about people like themselves. That came much later. So I went to the library and I pulled 2 books off like the YA bestseller shelf, and I read them, and I was like, oh, I sound like a 16-year-old girl. Sweet. So I wrote my next book, and it was a young adult fantasy, urban fantasy. And that book landed me my agent, which was fantastic. But much like Z, we couldn't sell it. So then I wrote another book, and this time I had a couple of ideas that I ran past my agent, and I mentioned this one where I was like, I want to write something scary. I feel like there's not a lot of scary books in YA right now. And I pitched this teen exorcist book, which is Possess. And she was like, write that one right now. And I did. I wrote it, most of it for NaNoWriMo in 2019. I'm sorry, 2009, not 2019. And we sold it in 2010, and it was supposed to come out in 2012, which is why I was part of the 2012 debut group, but my book actually got bumped up in publication, which doesn't happen a whole lot. But it happened with my debut, so it actually came out in August of 2011. And I've been with one agent this whole time. So, it was definitely, I didn't know anything about the business, and I clearly didn't know anything about writing when I wrote that first book, but I learned a lot along the way.
That's
It's all a learning process.
I love that you two both have like really different stories, because I think a lot of aspiring writers seem to really want like that magic formula. Like, what did you do? How did you get published? But I love
get that
hearing
all the
people,
time.
yeah, I love hearing people's publishing stories, because they're always so different and it's just individual. And Zoraida, I love how yours really involved like persistence and not giving up, and that, like you kind of took that first hit, which is like, yeah, that's so hard. How do you bounce back from, not nailing it first right off the bat? But like both of you did, so that's so good.
And I will add that back when we were writing those early books, self-publishing didn't really exist. There was no Kindle yet.
And it was very new.
It was
in
super
2012.
new, and it wasn't a thing. And I do believe that I am still published today because I was unable to self-publish my first book. Not that self-publishing is bad, by the way, it's not at all what I'm saying, but I had to learn how to write a book that was better, but that also was more to the market. Twice, once with my first horrible book, and then once with my YA, my first YA. So like, I had to keep trying because there wasn't another option. And I do feel like there was a time when everybody was just, if they didn't get an agent or they couldn't sell the book, they self-published it, which was great, except they weren't changing sort of what they were writing, because the market is always changing, and you have to at least keep a third eye on it.
That's a really good point. Because it's almost like you had to almost stretch your muscle to like be able to get there. And so like pushing yourself is such an important part of actually finishing a novel, because like essentially you went by like writing those, like the bad novel and then the urban fantasy YA, like you figured out your voice in YA, which is actually incredibly hard. I think that people are always in search of that.
And would I have done that if I self-published? I don't know, because I wouldn't have faced, this is something that I think a lot of us have learned in other aspects of our life. Clearly, I was a failed opera singer. But you learn as much from failure as you do from success. And Z and I have both had failures in our publishing career. We have both had books that haven't done as well as we had hoped, or as our publishers had hoped. And it's forced us to branch out. Look how many genres Z writes in. Like, she is so diversified in short stories and romance and sci-fi and fantasy and urban fantasy and high fantasy. Like, you have been able to show this amazing range in your writing.
I think it's like an evolution, right? But I'm not evolving into something that I don't want to be. I'm like evolving into different versions of myself, right? So no matter what I'm writing, whether it's romance, fantasy, or Star Wars, you can still tell that this is a Zoraida story and this is a Zoraida voice and Zoraida book, whatever that means, right? And so it's been a really good writing exercise in figuring out who like what I am.
I love that.
And then pulling that through genre.
Thing, that is so cool. Well, so Gretchen, for that first rom-com, could it be a horror book later? Like, can you
repurpose it? Do you still have it?
No, there is nothing salvageable about
my first novel. The first novel I wrote. Okay, you're about to find out like how ridiculous I am. I keep saying that. I keep prefacing all of my stories like that. Lately. When I was in high school, the first novel that I queried with before I interned at a literary agency, when I was 17 and still in high school, I wrote a novel using a quill pen that I bought at Barnes and Noble with red ink because it looked like blood. and it was about a witch. And it was 40,000 words long, and it was not a novel. But I wrote that book. I have it typed up, but I don't have the file anymore because it was on a floppy disk.
Oh.
But I still have the handwritten version.
Mhm.
So look,
Someday, Z, you can.
also definitely not salvageable.
No, there's nothing salvageable about this. Like the story, the characters, like it was like enough of a Mary Sue book at the time, just with what I was going through with the divorce, that it's like cringe worthy to read. I actually sent the first chapter of it to, I teach in addition to writing. I teach writing, and some of my students were like, "You never write anything," and I'm like, "You can't judge a finished book, like your manuscript in progress, against a published finished book. Like there's 100 sets of eyes on my book before it comes out." So I sent them like the first chapter of this crap that I wrote in like 2007, and I was like, I haven't opened this in a decade. I don't know what's in it, but there you go. This is what I look like when I don't, and I got better, and it's okay. It's okay to write crappy things.
Started, it was the start of your journey. I love that. Well, so you both write in genres that have been, like, let's just say, traditionally dominated by men, mostly white men. So what kind of challenges have you faced, like, as women writing in these genres? It seems like the book world and, hopefully, especially these genres are becoming more diverse, but, how's that been?
Well, horror is a small space. I'll start with that. It is definitely not a large genre, and a lot of publishers don't do like the really kind of extreme stuff. Not that I write extreme horror, but YA, on the other hand, is much more female dominated in general of authors, and so the number of women writing horror in YA far outstretches the number of men doing it. So we actually have sort of like our own small community. Still small, there's still not a lot of us. Part of it is there's this illusion that horror doesn't sell as well. And yes, I am not selling like high fantasy numbers of books, those that sell millions and millions of copies, but there is a market for it. Clearly, I've been able to do this for a while. Yeah, exactly. But I get weird things. I get weird comments like, you're too normal looking. You're like, I'm a put together female. They're like, oh, you look normal. You don't look weird. Like we all have to look weird. I know. Like, what am I supposed to look like? I'm supposed to have like only one tooth and like a hunchback or something. I don't know. I don't know.
I truly don't know what that comment is about.
No, but it's this very strange sense that because I write, and I'm funny, and I'm an extrovert. I have a bubbly personality. And so these things in their mind, like I should be a goth, I should have, I don't know, a lot for sure, but I got a lot. Like I thought.
Look, it's very intense. I don't think that so in fantasy, because I'm writing YA fantasy, I have not experienced a lot of pushback. I have had, and this is not about me specifically, this is just people who just hate on YA. Like, I've seen people say, really, other writers, other fellow authors who are like, YA is just poorly written, and if you want a character who's like this, looking at herself in the mirror and describing herself, and I'm like, have you read a YA book since like ever?
Since ever.
Yeah, since ever. Like, I'm like, the thing that you're talking about, where like a girl's describing herself in the mirror, like, I think you're talking about books written by men, because like I've never read that in like a YA written by like a woman.
Not to mention the fact that you'll see that in the adult market as well.
Yeah, exactly. So it was just like I've seen those kinds of comments, which is just so it's like a YA thing in general, and just because YA is an age group, and I'm like, there are bad books in adult too, right? Like real bad
But it is
ones.
inherently sexist, though, don't you
That's
think?
true.
See, like,
Yeah. Well,
because YA is female dominated, overwhelmingly. I mean, there are plenty of men that write YA, but like overwhelmingly, it's female dominated, both in editors and in authors. And so
sure.
comments like that, like we are less than, that what we do is not art because it's not for adults, is inherently sexist.
And
It's
it's the
because they say,
same thing.
those about romance. Yes,
It's yeah,
they say
same
the
thing
same
about
thing about
romance
romance.
because it does so well, right? Romance does
Mhm.
so well, and it's such a beloved genre. That's a true genre, right? Not an age group. And so it's something where like people dismiss it. You can read, it's okay to read Nicholas Sparks, who's not actually
Yeah.
romance because all his stuff is depressing. But that's art, right? That's a
Yeah.
love story. Whereas like anything else is smut. And like, and
Mhm.
so that's really annoying. When it came to Star Wars, um, when I wrote A Crash of Fate, I was actually really surprised at how welcoming and warm and wonderful all the readers were, even though I was writing a YA love story. Like this book. Hi,
Sorry.
It's a
I'm
baby.
sorry. Hi,
baby.
John.
And John. He's like, that's my
Welcome
room.
to pandemic
I know
pandemic panels.
that's the fun of virtual events. We get a
I
baby.
love
I love it.
it. Special
Um,
guest. But with
so cute.
Star Wars,
Yeah.
like I was so surprised with how warm and welcoming the fans were, the readers were. But it's also different because I'm not having, of course, there was like the random guy who would be like, women shouldn't write for Star Wars, and that was those are like real people that like shouted that at us, at me and another female author.
Despite the
At a
fact that the architect of the current Star Wars universe is a woman,
Exactly. They
right?
hate
I
her
mean,
too.
Kathleen
Yeah.
Kennedy like runs
I was gonna
that.
say.
Yeah. But it was just so fascinating to me where I was just like, wow, you really wasted your time and energy like coming to our table to yell women don't belong in Star Wars. Like, okay, bro. So, those are really isolated incidents. On a whole, I had a wonderful time with the novel aspect. My book is not in the like the Skywalker family. It's a tie-in set in the world of Batu, which is Galaxy's Edge, the theme park. And so I had a lot more freedom. And so you could come to that knowing what Star Wars is, and there's like spaceships and weird stuff and weird food and like Jedi, like the Force exists. And there are stormtroopers, but you don't have to know the continuity as much because it's like all new stories and stuff. And so I've had a lot of readers, and they've all been, a lot of them are men who are reading, like adult men who are reading this YA novel, and are like, I didn't realize this was YA until I started reading it, and it sounds a little young, but I really enjoyed it. And I'm like, great, that's awesome.
Good.
So
There's
I
always a little insult though, isn't there, when like an
yeah,
adult is like, I really actually enjoyed this book. And
I,
you're like, oh, thanks.
even
you.
though it's YA. Yeah,
Yeah.
no,
Even though
that's
it's a little young, you're like,
because
Yeah,
you've like infiltrated because those guys are going to read any Star Wars book, right? Because they're like completionists. So
they
now
do. Yeah, it's
you've
like
like gone in and changed their mindset about YA or a book by a woman. So yeah.
and there are so many other female authors, like other authors writing in in Star Wars, right? There's Ray Carson and Rebecca Roanhorse, and Delilah Dawson and Claudia Gray, and like there's just so many of these wonderful people writing books. And they're some of the most beloved, like other than Timothy Zahn, who's like, the Star Wars author book king. Like it's Claudia Gray who's like one of the most beloved Star Wars authors, and so like I think that there's something different about the book section of Star Wars for sure.
Well, it's nice to hear that even though, like I said, it's kind of a traditionally male dominated field that, by and large, you guys have had really good experiences thus far. So, yay, let's keep it up, society. Let's be cool. Um, so, actually, I was going to ask a little bit more about the process, Zoraida, about writing a Star Wars book. I'm a big Star Wars fan. I love Galaxy's Edge. It's so exciting that you got to write about that. So like how did that project come to you, and what kind of restrictions and what kind of freedoms did you have in writing it?
So I've done a lot of IP. IP just means intellectual property, right? You're writing a book for a company. And Star Wars has been by far the easiest IP company to work for, like, believe it or not, because they were like, so they asked me to, they asked if I would be interested in writing a YA romance for Star Wars. And I said, how much blood do you need and where do I sign? Right? Like, that's what you do. Also, can you write it in 2 days? Just kidding. Like, it was a very short amount of time, but that was the stipulation. And so I said, of course, I would be incredibly into this. They gave me access to the plans of Galaxy's Edge because it wasn't built yet. So I got this like 180 page PDF that was scanned, so it wasn't searchable. So if I needed to, like, I had to make my own glossary, because if I needed to like go find like, oh, where was a section about foods, where's a section about animals, where's a section about buildings, like I had to write it down, because I was like, crap, now I have to reread this whole thing and search for it.
Wow.
It's fine. It was great. It was beautiful. The art was incredible. It was like really, really harkening back to like the Ralph McQuarrie, like that 70s um uh retrofitted space tech, right? And so it was really beautiful to be able to see all of that preliminary art. And another author did get to go, but she lived in Florida, so it was just easier for her to be like, can I drive down to like, like an hour and a half to see it, just so that I know where everything is. I had to use my imagination. Heaven forbid. And so the restrictions were, I didn't have a lot of restrictions, I think, or maybe I'm just like remembering it better. I think that there were some things like my comment. So Star Wars Story Group had to read my book, and so did Disney Engineering, like Imagineering. So like on top of my regular editor. And so I had 3 sets of eyes being like, this is a little too nice for a stormtrooper. And I'm like, okay. What should I say? So they would tell me, or like, there's actually 2 moons on this planet, right? And so and they were like, you're using a lot of the existing planets a lot, why don't you make up your own? And I'm like, I can do that. So I made up a lot of like new moons for Star Wars, and there's like a Star Wars story group person who like documented my world, so it's like in canon. And it exists in the Star Wars universe. It's really freaking cool, and that's the coolest thing I've ever done. So A Crash of Fate still remains like the coolest IP. And they just asked me if I wanted to do it because the one of the editors was familiar with I had written a short story for a Star Wars anthology before that, in the collection From a Certain Point of View. And that editor found me because she had read my Brooklyn Brujas series, and she just knew that I liked Star Wars because all I did was post like inappropriate things about Poe Dameron. So sometimes Twitter works in your favor.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, occasionally, right?
So, did you finally got to visit Galaxy's Edge, I'm assuming, and what was your
Yeah.
thoughts? And was it at Disney World or Disneyland?
The one in Florida.
Disney World.
So yeah, they brought they brought a group of Star Wars authors. It was myself, Delilah Dawson, Ethan Sachs, and Will Sliney. And so Ethan and Will did a comic book for Galaxy's Edge. Delilah Dawson did the adult Galaxy's Edge book, and I did the YA. And so they brought us down, and I literally can't go back to Disney ever again because they gave us like the VIP treatment. And I'm like, great, now I have to wait in line. Like, what the hell is this? So
That won't do.
so it was really wonderful. I got to see the park. I got to when you walk around, my favorite thing was like when you call Kylo Kyle, they still have to remain in character, but so every now and then there's always the one whose like lips will twitch and be like, oh, you're a part of the rebellion. It was just really fun. I bought a lot of toys and spent a lot of money on like Star Wars action figures and stuff. So that was really fun. It was great. I loved it.
That's awesome. I love that. That's amazing. Oh, well, Gretchen, I wanted to ask you about your experience with having your books adapted for the screen. Because here we have like the screen property that became, a novel with Zoraida, and you had,
I
your
know.
novels adapted. So tell us about that.
The opposite. It's interesting. Like, I don't write bestsellers, right? I'll put that out there right now. Like, I've never had a book on the New York Times bestseller list. I don't have, like I said, millions of books sold every year. So, to have not one, but two of my properties turned into screen adaptations is like far greater thing than I could ever have imagined. I think part of it has to do with just dumb luck, like a producer finding the book at the right time and being passionate about it. And I do think part of it is that my books are cheap to adapt, meaning there's no special effects, right? There's no fantasy world building. I mean, I watched the first 2 episodes of Shadow and Bone, and that is a sexy, expensive. Lush, amazing,
So expensive.
Yes, and mine are not that. Okay, they take place in the real world, and they have not necessarily small casts, but smaller casts who wear everyday clothes and go to high school. And in the case of 10, there's really just one set, which is the house and the island. And so you can do those things on a smaller budget. And I think that is a barrier to entry that a lot of people don't understand. Having worked in television, my ex-husband was also a screenwriter. So I have seen a lot of, and then my current husband is an entertainment attorney. So I know about how these things, how much they cost and how financing works. And I get emails all the time, which Z, I'm sure you do too, which is why isn't Murder trending a movie? And I'm like, you got 15 mil?
Yeah, literally.
Because I will take that money and we will make a movie. But and that's, of course, that would be like cheap end budget, right? That'd be like budget. That'd be like Blumhouse horror, So the fact that even happened is mind blowing. I had nothing to do with either of them. I'm just going to put that out there first. I didn't write scripts. I didn't have casting approval. I didn't get to visit sets or anything like that. They did send me scripts for the Get Even, the first 2 episodes in advance, which was really fun. The weirdest thing about that one is that it's set in the UK. The books are set in Northern California. But when they wanted to do it for the BBC, obviously they were setting it in Manchester. So a lot of my jokes were not as funny. So yeah. Like most of my jokes from the book were entirely cut from the screenplay. I mean, there is some humor in it, but it's not like
it's
like
not
my
Gretchen humor.
Yeah, I know. But the most important things in both cases for me were that the directors, producers, casting directors, whatever, maintained the diversity of the cast. Both books have very diverse casts. And in fact, especially in the case of 10, they added diversity. Meg is a Caucasian character in the book, and she's a Black actress that played Meg. And they even asked me, like, is that okay? I'm like, more diversity? Always okay. You know, as long as you're not whitewashing my book, I'm fine with it. So that was important to me. And then in the case of Get Even and Get Dirty, it was really important to me that they maintained the sense that these four girls who sort of start off as not friends, they're sort of they call themselves coworkers, that they become friends, they work for each other, they protect each other, they care for each other, they're not trying to tear each other down. Not that that's all you see in YA, but you do see a fair amount of that, especially in contemporary YA. And I just wanted to show that girls can help each other, and the world is a better place when they do, when they're not in competition with each other, when they're there to lift each other up. And so I felt, if you view the series, I think they really did a wonderful job of keeping both of those aspects in the Get Even series, even though, you know, a lot of things were changed. The basics of the plot remain, even though there were a lot of changes. But, you know, it's been a wonderful, if surreal experience, much like Z, seeing her Star Wars stuff become canon. You know, like this series will exist, you know, for maybe longer than printed copies of my book, and the fact that people thought enough of the story to want to invest time and money in it, it means a lot to me.
Oh, that's so cool. It's so neat to see that the stories come to life. Because yeah, I mean, it'll reach a whole different audience too that might have not gone into a bookstore or a library, which is exciting.
Yeah.
Because I mean, a lot of us have, you know, influences from the screen that really, you know, change how we take in media and, you know, what kind of media we enjoy. So actually I wanted to ask both of you, what were some of your early influences? Like Gretchen, did you always love horror movies? Or Zoraida, like what was the first Star Wars movie you saw? I mean, what were some of those early influences?
What was the first Star Wars? Because you weren't even alive when the
I
original
wasn't
trilogy
alive.
came out.
I wasn't alive when the original.
I saw 2 of the 3 in the theater. I was only 2 when of course I still call it Star Wars because that's how old I am. But
Yes.
when A New Hope came out, I was only 2. But I saw Empire and Jedi in the theater when they came out. Like,
Yes.
that's how old I am.
I was like in the womb when the first one came out, but my parents, who were very conservative about what like a small child should be watching, inexplicably took me to go see Empire Strikes Back,
Which is
like,
a dark movie.
Yeah, for sure.
I remember being like, the guy is cutting into the animal. Why? Like that was like, I don't know if I just like ended my viewing experience at the Tauntaun because that was
right.
Like,
Don't remember anything else.
Yeah,
my first one was definitely my first one was A New Hope, but I still called it Star Wars because I was like, oh wait, they have individual titles.
Yeah.
And the first one was always Star Wars to me, and it's because I had them on VHS. So
Yep.
my mom's coworker, this like really, really lovely guy. I don't know what happened in his life, but he must have had like a midlife crisis or something, because he gave me and my brother all of his Star Wars toys. They were not in like any boxes, so they were not worth anything. But
Midlife crisis.
yeah, like I have like a Luke Skywalker action figure, and like the ships, like the TIE fighters and the other ones, which you can take away my Star Wars license because I don't know its name. And so he gave us all of these toys and the VHS of the Star Wars movies. And so my brother and I used to watch them all the time. And then a teacher, one of my English teachers, he actually bought me, because I was such an amazing student and like a suck up student. He bought me the special edition, the new version that came out, as like a graduation present. So that was really sweet. And so I had the new versions. And so I started there, like my Star Wars obsession has always been there. As far as books, I was always a very, very curious child. I wanted magic in the world. I'm from Ecuador, and so a lot of my teachers growing up, every single teacher I've ever had in English, from like first grade to, my senior year of high school, they would always be like, oh, you should read The House on Mango Street. And I'm like, but I'm not Mexican. Right? Like, it's not my story. It's not something that I connect with. It's a gorgeous book, right? It's obviously part of the Latin American literature canon, but it's not the story that I wanted. And I think that I wanted magic, and so I looked for magic. I used to go to the library and Jamaica Queen's library and type in like any word I thought was magical. So I would type in eclipse and vampire and witch, and if it was in the title or in the metadata, I would pull it out and I would read it. And uh, yeah, and just spend like my after school, I would just like stay at the library and read. And I found books like In the Forest of the Nights. There were definitely some books that were not magical at all. They just had like eclipse in the title, but it was actually about like a girl suffering from depression, and her dad like almost kills himself, and like it was really depressing. It was a sad book. It was called Eclipse, but it was a teen book at the time. Um, and I discovered Amelia Atwater Rhodes and Holly Black, and because I couldn't buy books, right? My mom was like, if you have extra money, like you're not going to buy it on books, you're going to buy it on food or, clothes or something. So libraries really, really saved my imagination and my obsession with the supernatural.
Oh, I love to hear it. I mean, that's what we try to be here for. And man, hearing your story definitely is like, oh, during the pandemic, people can't just like wander in and search for like what they want, but
I know.
we
I do
are.
have my Libby app. I do have
Yes.
the Libby library app. So that's where I get all of my book stuff.
Yeah, things have changed a lot. Like we offer a lot more digital stuff. And, as the pandemic's improving, we are, opening our services more and more. But yeah, it's like, I hope we can get back soon to that, place where young kids can just wander in and search up Eclipse and find what they want.
My toddler has never been to a library.
Right.
Because he's 2.5. And we haven't been able to go for story time, anything like that, now that he's old enough to actually sit and pay attention. And that, I grew up practically in a library. My mother was a kindergartner, and like Zoraida, we didn't have a lot of money growing up, and we were at the library every weekend checking out books. And it was a librarian first handed me a John Bellairs book when I was like, I don't know, 9, 10, something like that. And for those of you that don't know, John Bellairs wrote like Gothic middle grade in the 70s and early 80s. Boy protagonists, of course, but you may know The House with the Clock in Its Walls. It's Eli Roth did the movie adaptation with like Jack Black, and I forget who else was in it. But anyway, so the Gothic, like not quite horror, but like dark books were sort of early for me. And then I moved into Agatha Christie somewhere in the like middle grade-ish, and read all of them like a summer, I think. And so, my books, even though there's, horror elements, I think they are very heavily influenced by murder mysteries. There's always a mystery part. And I do, Agatha Christie. And then I read a lot of like Victorian and Edwardian Gothic. So everything from the Brontes to Sheridan Le Fanu, Ambrose Bierce, a lot of the short stories, M.R. James. I read all, if it was like a it was like a ghost story set in England, I read it. So, so all of that sort of comes together to help create the tone that I go for in my books. And but it was all that early reading, it sort of is the foundation for what I do. So I'm chasing the light as the sun goes down, so I apologize.
I know, it's
there we go.
It's kind of cloudy too, so it's hard. No, you look beautiful, don't worry.
It was a nice diffusing light, but like the lighting in my bedroom is not ideal, so
I know, that's the problem with the virtual events. But yeah, no, that's so great. Thank you for sharing that, because that's really like we become like what we consume in terms of media, and it's so I love that. I love hearing about people's influences. So we have just a few more minutes. And by the way, audience members, please feel free to drop your questions in the Q&A. So let's see. Last question for me would be like, what's been getting you through the pandemic? What has your best pandemic purchase been? And like, how has it been for you as authors in this pandemic? Like what other than just the world being kind of terrible? Like,
I
how's it?
mean,
It's tough.
yeah.
It's tough. It's tough on extroverts like Z and I. Like, we're used to being out with people. And
I forgot how much energy I siphon from other people
Mhm.
as like an extrovert.
Yeah.
That
We're
like
energy vampires. That's what
oh
we
my
do.
God. Yeah. I used to go because I used to like I had my bookstore was literally right when I was in New York, like across the park from me, and I would walk across the park and go to the local book event and like then go out to drinks with the authors afterward. And like now I'm just like I'm wearing the same pajamas I've been wearing for 3 days, and I haven't even washed my hair, and like, because who's gonna look at me? You
Yep.
guys now, but so I made an exception.
But this is all an illusion, right?
This is an illusion. But the thing that's getting me through is like just rewatching my favorite things. It's been really rough. Living in Puerto Rico right now has been great because I get to go to the beach. It's across the street.
That's nice.
Yeah, I need water. I need an ocean, even if I can't go into it. Like in New York, I can't go into the water, gross. But here is great. And just like the support from my friends, nice messages from readers who are like, your book is getting me through pandemic. And I'm like, great. I've been rereading a lot of books because I can't get into a lot of new stuff lately. So I just reread my friends' books. And now we have Shadow and Bone, which I like. I already finished watching it. I'm gonna watch it again. So
Totally. It's all about like the comfort, huh? Like, I love that you touched upon rereading things. I think that's definitely strikes a chord with a lot of us. It's just like can't take in new information, but we can revisit those things that we love. And again, those things that kind of form who we are, right? What about you, Gretchen?
I will say the biggest takeaway from this quarantine and pandemic for me has been like a thankfulness for my family.
You had a
I'm married.
baby in the
I had a baby during the pandemic. I had a baby during the pandemic. So I have a 2.5-year-old and an 11-month-old. And so she was born at the end of May 2020. And that was its own experience. Like we had a C-section. My husband was there for we had it in the morning. He was there for the day. He had to go home to put our son to bed, and he couldn't come back to the hospital. Like that was it. So it was just me in the hospital post C-section for 4 days until I could be released. And so, that was and I didn't get to see my son, and he didn't get to see his sister until we came home from hospital. And, and again, we're all healthy. I have nothing to complain about. Because like I was saying before we got on the air, if you're going to be stuck at home with the same, 3 other people, it might as well be like, because you have a new baby, pandemic, same thing. I'm not missing out on anything. There's no FOMO because nobody's doing anything. So there's that. But my husband works from home. I work from home. We have to juggle childcare, and we're doing great. Like, and this sounds really trite, but like, you really find out a whole lot about your relationship when you don't get to see anybody else for a long time. And what we've learned is that we really appreciate each other. And, even though, especially with the sleep deprivation of young children, there have been, more, my temper has been a little more fraught than normal, but, I'm thankful for him that he makes sure that I have time to write when I need it. Especially I had to write a book. I had to deliver a book on, when was it? September 1st, I think. Yeah, September 1st, I had to deliver a manuscript, and of 2020. And so I had to work, I had to write with a young infant and a toddler, and we just had to figure it out. And it wasn't easy, but we did it. So, as far as my favorite purchase, I actually bought an Alpha Smart Neo 2, which is basically like
Nice.
a word process, a low tech, like 3-line LCD screen word processor. It's like they made them for kids to type on in high school back in the early 2000s. And you just type wherever you are. It fits in my purse. It's super light. The thing's indestructible. My toddler plays with it all the time. And because I found that, like, I'm sitting in a car waiting for groceries to be delivered to my trunk, and that's when I have time to write because there's no kids screaming, right? Or I'm at the doctor's office, waiting for a checkup or whatever, and that's when I have time to write. So just always having it with me has helped. It's sort of given me the space to create, because the one thing, I was on a Y'all West panel yesterday morning, and they asked a similar question, and the one thing that I miss the most is mental space. I get no mental space, right? There is, from the minute my toddler wanders into the bedroom and wakes me up sometime between 5:45 and 7:30, and who knows where in that realm it's going to be on a given day, until they both go to bed at night and I pour the wine, I am moving. I am doing something for somebody else almost all the time. And so the time to think about writing is the thing that I miss the most. And that, I don't know when that changes with small children, but I hope it changes soon, because I do need some space to think about story. It's not just about sitting down and typing. Like, that's the least.
Right. That's
Like,
the action of writing. There's
there's
the other part. Yeah.
Totally.
So I miss that the most.
I can imagine. Well, actually, so one of our attendees has a question for you both. What is your favorite thing to listen to while you're writing? So speaking of like the process of writing, we'll just
Screaming children. No.
yeah, screaming children. It's a hit all the time in my
my
house.
goodness. I make playlists on Spotify for my books.
Nice.
So my Spotify name is Zoraida Solo. And so I try to set a mood for myself for when I'm writing. I can't listen to them when I'm editing. So when I'm editing, I listen to scores. So if I have a fantasy score, I pull up any fantasy, The Witcher, Lord of the Rings, King Arthur, like whatever. I pull those up, and in Illusionary, the third book was edited to the Pirates of the Caribbean soundtrack. So every time I hear that, like, like that intro guitar, my friends hate me because I went on a retreat with them and I literally played it nonstop while I was editing.
They
Wow.
secretly love it though. That's what I think. I love that. Gretchen, do you have anything in particular that you like?
Well, it's funny, as a musician, so I have a BA from UCLA in vocal performance and a master's of music and opera performance from the Maryland Opera Studio at the University of Maryland. So music to me is not as relaxing, I think, as it is for a lot of people. For me, it's, and not that it's work, but it's sort of business, right? Like, I listen to music and I'm thinking about the performance. I'm thinking about even non-vocal music, if I'm listening to, Yevgeny Kissin do Chopin versus, Lang Lang doing Chopin, like, they're a very different thing. And I'm thinking about that, right? Because
that sounds exhausting.
Well, it is. And so that's why I don't listen to music when I write at all. It's too, it competes with the story and what I'm trying to do. So I actually, back in the day, before children, I would write a lot to sort of background noise. And I don't mean white noise. I mean like sports, a lot of baseball. I watch a lot of baseball, and no, I am not a Dodgers fan. Don't come at me. I'm from San Francisco. I am a diehard Giants fan. So I would have a lot of sports on in the background because you don't have to pay attention a whole lot, but there's an activeness to it. Like, there's a background noise to sports, whether it's the squeaky shoes of a basketball game or the sort of background noise.
I miss coffee shops and bars to write in.
Yeah, that background. It's not white noise, but
it's great.
But it's an active background noise, and it keeps me from falling asleep, first of all, because now, like, first thing I want to do, I mean, I cannot tell you how many times I have fallen asleep at the keyboard with my fingers on it, like post kids, because I just don't, I'm always sleep deprived. But So now it's just sort of like whenever I can. It's usually when the kids are napping. And so I'm much more likely to just have nothing on. And actually I relish the silence a little bit more than I used to because I don't get a whole lot of it. And I know that that will change. Like the kids will go to preschool and then, I'll do write in a different way, or, go to the library again. I used to, before the pandemic, I would go to the library a lot and write when I had somebody watching the kids. So, but it's adapting. And that's, the pandemic has been an exercise in adaptation for everybody, for creatives, in a way that's different maybe than other people, but we're adapting, and we're figuring out ways to make it work. Z ran to Puerto Rico and
did. I put all my stuff in storage and I moved down here for a few months, and then like trying to figure out like when I'm gonna make the next jump.
You should just stay. Like, it sounds so nice.
Yeah, but none of us are there. That's the problem.
Right?
Yeah.
I know. But I'm like, oh, the ocean. That sounds fabulous. Well, I love it. Well, thank you, ladies. I think we've pretty much reached the end of our time here. So I'm going to go ahead and let our attendees know who won the prizes. So let's go ahead and do our giveaways. But thank you so much, ladies, for these words of wisdom about, what we're all going through, especially, this pandemic. It's a wild time. And Gretchen, you're right. It's just a lot of adaptation, and that can be exhausting too. It's like adapting to one thing after another.
Yeah.
But
yeah. After another for a year and a half,
Yeah, it's exhausting, but I love that you both are hanging in there, and let's all just keep hanging in there. All right, so our first prizes, we have a copy of Murder Trending by Gretchen, and the winner is Angela Burke. So congratulations, Angela. And then we have a copy of A Crash of Fate, and that one is going to go to Kieran. So congratulations to Kieran. Yay. And then we also have a copy of Incendiary, and that is going to go to Jamie. So congratulations to our winners. If you're a winner, oh, good. My colleague
Lauren's on it.
Put it in the comments. Thank you,
Lauren.
I know the rest of you, the attendees, didn't know, but we have a secret librarian here behind the scenes running things. So Lauren says, if you're a winner, please email libraryprograms@cityofmissionviejo.org to arrange for pickup if you're local, and we'll mail you the prize if you're not local. So either way, hit us up at that email address. I wanted to share that we are working with our bookseller partner, Creating Conversations, and they have a link to where you can buy all the fabulous books by the creators that we featured all week at Comic Fest. So please go ahead and give them a visit. Yesterday was Independent Bookstore Day, but we can celebrate that all year, right? We love our independent bookstores. So
for sure.
Yeah. So if you didn't win a prize, go ahead and hop over to Creating Conversations and pick up one of these books. I'm sure a lot of you are so excited to read Gretchen and Zorida's books that you've heard about all hour long. And, just once again, Gretchen and Zarida, thank you so much for giving your time and energy to join us tonight. I'm so excited that you were here. This was such a great conversation. And it's going to be archived. We're going to upload the recording probably next week. So everyone can look for that on the Mission Viejo Library Facebook page. If you guys are not already following us, please go ahead and follow us. And Gretchen and Zarida, can you share your social media presences to so everyone can follow you, your websites or Instagrams, the TikToks?
Yeah, the TikToks. Oh my God, it's a bridge too far.
Right.
GretchenMcNeil.com. Nice and easy. My Twitter is @Gretchen McNeil, but then to be complicated, my Instagram is Gretchen_McNeil, because someone had already snagged Gretchen McNeil when I was signing up.
Oh my goodness.
That's where you can find me.
I'm putting mine in the chat, but it's also ZaritaCordova.com. My Twitter is Z like in Zorro, the phrase Z like in Zorro. And on Instagram, I'm Zoraida Solo. And also, like Gretchen, my name was already taken when I went to sign up on,
that's crazy.
on those, which is like Come on.
Crazy. That's crazy.
Did you go friend the other Zoraida Cordova though, or like is that
No.
your nemesis?
No.
Okay. Because there's an Alison Tran who lives in Australia, and I would get her email, and now we're friends, guys. We're friends on Facebook.
Nice.
Random story, if we have a second. I live on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, and there is a Zarita Cordova who lives on the West Side of Manhattan.
What?
No.
Yeah.
Is she like Bizarro Zoraida?
She is. She absolutely is. And she's a vegan. So she's literally the opposite of me.
I love it. Well, I think everyone has like a doppelganger or a name twin out there. And I think it's like a rule they have to be either like your new bestie or your nemesis. So.
Nemesis for sure.
Nemesis. Yeah. For sure.
Yeah.
There can be only one. It's Highlander up in my business.
All right.
Yeah, sure.
You heard it here, folks.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Good night.
Take care. Bye, everyone.